Welcome back to yet another Mech Deck Tech, brought to you by Arcane Fortress, makers of TCG accessories including deck boxes, binders, sleeves, and more. There is a link down below that'll give you 5% off any of your purchases and help our channel. So, Storm Force of Nature. This is a 3/4 flying vigilant commander. Whenever they deal combat damage to a player, the next instant or sorcery we cast this turn is going to have Storm. So I kind of wish it gave all of our spells for this turn Storm, but probably a little broken. But what are we doing with Storm? Well, we basically have 4 categories of cards here, right? We are going for big card draw, big mana, big damage, and copying spells. Those are our 4 big categories. Let's dive on into them. We're going to start off with our card draw. Some of these cards are obviously going to hit multiple categories, which is nice, but we're only going to touch on them once. So right off the bat, we have Jace Reawakened. So this is a 2-cost Planeswalker with 3 loyalty. Now you can't cast them right away, right? They do make you wait until, at least the 4th turn to put them out, despite the fact that they only cost 2 mana, but I think that's okay. So they have a couple different abilities here. The first +1 is going to let us draw a card, discard a card, so a little bit of looting, we're here for it. The second +1 is going to let us go ahead and basically plot a cheap spell. It has to be mana value of 3 or less. But, hey, that's going to raise our storm count on a future turn. At, basically no cost to us at all. And the final ability is a -6, so a little costly. But I think we're going to hit it all right. And whenever we cast any instants or sorceries for the rest of the turn, we get to copy them and choose new targets for those copies. Ral Crackling Wit follows that up. So they are a 4-cost Planeswalker with 4 loyalty. +1 gives you a little Prowess Otter. We're kind of here for it, right? We don't actually have a ton of creatures natively in the deck, so the ability to generate some is pretty nice. Their -3 ability is going to let you draw 3 cards and discard 2. And if you manage to get them all the way up to their -10, you're going to draw 3 cards and get an emblem that gives each of your instants and sorceries Storm. Moving down into some creature-based draw, we have Archmage Emeritus. So this is a 4-cost 2/2 with Magecraft. So Magecraft is going to let us draw a card here whenever we cast or copy an instant or sorcery. So he's going to be keeping our hand nice and full. Bone Horde Drakasar. So you might be thinking, Mech, that's not card draw. I disagree. It's impulse draw. I'm going to count it here. So they are a flying, first striking 5/5 dinosaur dragon for 5 mana. Beginning of your upkeep, you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library. You get to play each of them this turn, which is nice. If you exile a land, you get a dinosaur. If you exile a non-land, you get treasure, which helps you go ahead and cast a spell that you just exiled. It's a win-win. Laelia, the Blade Reforged. So Laelia is a hasty 2/2 for 3. On attack, you're going to exile the top card of your library, and you can play it this turn. But just in general, whenever you exile things, bam, she getting bigger. Professional Facebreaker is up next. So they are great, right? They're a 2/3 for 3. With Menace, and whenever any of your creatures deal combat damage to a player, you get to create some treasures. You can also sacrifice those treasures for a little bit more of that impulse draw. We're moving out into some Doctor Who territory with the 10th Doctor. I personally love the 10th Doctor. I have a whole deck built around him, but he's a 3/5 for 5 mana, right? Whenever you attack, not specifically with the Doctor, but just in general, you will exile off the top of your library until you hit a non-land card. Then, that card is going to gain Suspend. For 7 mana, you could time travel 3 times. So, we have a couple things in the deck that have Suspend natively that are going to resuspend themselves, which is kind of why he's included in here. But he also works really well with Laelia, the Blade Reforged, which we already, saw earlier. And, I think there's good value to be found here. Moving down into some spell-slinging territory for this card draw, we have Deep Analysis. So Deep Analysis is a 4-cost blue sorcery, which is going to let us draw 2 cards and can be flashed back for 1 in the blue, as well as paying 3 life. Enter the Enigma is pulling double duty. So, single blue, creature can't be blocked, and we get to draw a card. Kind of here for it. Explore also feels like it's kind of playing double duty, right? It's ramping us and giving us card draw. So for 1 in the green, we get to draw a card and play an extra land this turn. Faithless Looting. So Faithless Looting is great, right? It's more card draw. Yeah, we're filling up our bin, but don't worry, we have a bunch of ways of giving things in our bin flashback, so we're not all that concerned about it. But draw 2, discard 2. We can flash it back for 2 in a red. And these flashbacks are important, right? Because that means in the future, once we have, a very large mana turn, we can really storm off, super hard. Highway Robbery. So Highway Robbery is nice as well. Lets us either discard a card or sacrifice a land, probably never doing that second part, but, it's an option. If we do, we get to draw cards, and we can plot it, again, making it so we're setting up for a future big storm turn. Ignite the Future. So Ignite the Future is phenomenal, right? 4 mana, impulse draw 3 cards, which we can play until the end of our next turn. It's also able to be flashed back for 8 mana, which, granted, is a lot, but if it's flashed back, the spells we exile off the top are going to be free to cast. So I think there's good balance there. Inspiring Refrain. So this is one of those cards that I told you about earlier. They're going to re-exile themselves after they come out of suspend. So repeated value, and in this case, repeated card draw. So we're going to draw 2 cards, exile it with 3 time counters on it, and we could suspend it early for that 2 and a blue to kind of get this chain going. Lock and Load. We're going to draw a card, then draw a card for each other instant and sorcery we've already cast this turn. So Pseudo Storm could also be plotted, so again, a nice way of kind of setting up one big storm turn. Ponder is going to follow that up, right? We really like these tiny cantrips to kind of boost our storm count. So single blue, look at the top 3, put them back in any order, allows us to shuffle if we want to, and then we draw a card. Preordain is in a similar spot where we're going to basically just look at the top 2. We could put them back in any order or to the bottom if we don't want either of them, and then go ahead and draw ourselves a card. Storm's Will, aka Jessica's Will, definitely not budget, but comes, in the secret layer. So, easy enough to grab for yourself, right? So 3 mana. If we control Storm when we go ahead and cast this, we're going to get both effects, which is to get red mana equal to the number of cards in an opponent's hand, as well as impulse draw 3 cards. Dropping down into some instant speed shenanigans, we have Big Score. So Big Score is 4 mana. It is going to also require us to discard a card, but we do get to draw 2 cards and create 2 treasures. And again, the fact that we have ways of making a lot of our things have flashback, some of them already natively have it, means that we're not afraid to discard big cards and really just dig through this deck. Brainstorm follows that up, so we're going to go ahead and draw 3, put 2 from our hand back on top. Frantic Search. So Frantic Search is 3 mana. We're going to draw 2, discard 2, untap some lands. Basically free card draw because it costs that 3 if we happen to have any of our lands that tap for double. Not double rather, but like at least 2 mana. We actually can net positive some mana there. And if we're doing that with Storm, right, we're just, we're burning and churning. We're getting through this deck. Growth Spiral, so basically another exploration for us. So for, a green and a blue, we're going to draw a card and play an extra land. It's phenomenal. Opt is going to let us scry 1 and then go ahead and draw a card for a single blue mana. Aurora Borealis is great. For 1 in a hybrid rule, we're going to add 2 mana to our pool and draw a card. Case of the Ransacked Lab is up next, and I kind of love the cases in general. I think they're very interesting and can be very powerful. So for that 3 mana, we're already getting a reduction on the cost of each of our instants and sorceries. While that's not going to help some of them that only cost, a single colored mana, most of them cost at least a little bit generic. So the reduction is going to go a long way. And once we've cast at least 4 in a single turn, bam, it's unlocked. From that point on, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, we're going to draw cards. Following that up, we have Wizard Class. So Wizard Class is immediately going to give us no maximum hand size, which is great because, again, we're drawing a lot of cards here, right? And although we don't necessarily mind discarding them, you know, if we don't have to, we kind of don't want to, right? We want to be able to use them multiple times. Once we level it up, we immediately get to draw 2 cards, which is nice. And for 5 mana, we can level it up to level 3. So whenever we draw a card, we're going to go ahead and put a +1/+1 counter onto a target creature. Probably going to be Storm. She flies, she's vigilant. You know, we kind of want to beef her up. After all that card draw, we need ways of casting these spells, right? We need big mana. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with the Reaver Cleaver. This is a nice little equipment for 3 mana. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 in trample, and whenever they deal combat damage to a player, we're going to create that many treasure tokens. So she already flies, right? So she already has some evasion, but in the event that they have, you know, some flyers themselves that they can just chump, we're like, no. We're getting through. We're dealing with damage, we're getting our storm effect, and we're getting some treasures to cast our spells. Seething Song, right? 3 mana, adds 5 red, feels pretty good. Visions of Ruin. So Visions of Ruin is an interesting way of kind of like gaining treasure. So it is ramp in a sense, but for 4 mana, each opponent's going to sacrifice an artifact. For each artifact sacrificed this way, we get to gain a treasure. We could flash it back for 10. That cost is reduced by the mana value of our commander, so 4. So for 6, we could flash it back and do it again. This definitely feels like one of those cards that are prime to, like, be stormed off with. It's like, oh, you're playing this, like, very large and in-charge equipment deck. Well, I've cast, like, 3 spells and I just punched you with Storm. Go ahead and sacrifice, you know, 4 artifacts apiece. I'm gonna gain a bunch of treasure. Don't mind if I do. Strike It Rich. So Strike It Rich just creates as a treasure. It could be flashed back. And again, it's kind of begging to be stormed with, just to like give us a bunch of big ramp. Rousing Refrain, right? We already had the Inspiring one, now we're Rousing. So 5 mana, effectively half of a Jeska's Will, where we're gonna add red mana to our pool, equal to the number of cards in an opponent's hand. But we could also suspend it for 2. That'll let us suspend it for 3 turns, and once it's cast, it resuspends itself. Kind of skipped over this one earlier, we're going to double back to it. It's Search for Tomorrow. So Search for Tomorrow is a nice way of kind of just doing a little bit of ramp, so it's not big mana, but it is, you know, ramp in general. We could also suspend it for 2 turns by paying a single green mana. Mana Geyser. So 5 mana is going to add red mana to our pool, equal to the number of tapped lands our opponents control. So again, you know, depending on what we're doing in terms of, you know, wanting to cast big mana spells, it's only going to use red mana for it, but still pretty good. The Storm Kiln Artist. So you know them, you love them. They have Magecraft to generate as treasures. They get beefier for just treasures existing on our field. We're really here for the creation of the treasures, more so than beefing them up, though. So, we've drawn a bunch of cards. We've generated a bunch of mana. We're obviously casting spells. We may as well copy them, right? So we're going to start off here with a Ral Storm's Conduit. So, they're going to deal damage whenever we cast spells anyways, which is lovely. We could scry for that +2, which is nice. For -2, the next instant or sorcery we cast has Storm. Right, we're gonna copy it for each instant and sorcery we've already cast this turn. Lier, Disciple of the Drowned. You might be thinking, Mech, that's not copying. Yeah, you're right? We're only allowing each of our instants and sorceries engraved to have flashback, but being able to use a spell a second time is copy adjacent, if you will. So I'm going to count them in here, just so we don't have to have a 5th section for them. Past in Flames. So Past in Flames is great. It does cost us 4 mana, but it gives each of our instants and sorceries in our grave flashback equal to their basic mana value, which is often much cheaper than, you know, whatever their flashback is normally. And obviously anything that doesn't already have flashback gains flashback for these big storm turns. Galvanic Iteration. So 2 mana, whenever we cast our next instant or sorcery, we get to copy it. Has flashback natively, kinda here for it. Increasing Vengeance. So 2 red, whenever we cast our next instant or sorcery, we again get to copy it. If we cast this from our grave instead of, from our hand, because it has flashback natively, we get to copy that spell twice. Twinferno. So Twinferno is actually pretty good, right? 1 in a red. Next instant or sorcery we cast gets copied, or target creature gains double strike. So that's actually really great, right? Give things Storm multiple times. It's allowed. If Storm hits twice, we have 2 iterations of the next spell we cast has Storm. They'll both go off in the very next instant or sorcery we cast. It's a good time. We're naturally running Thousand Year Storm in the deck. 6 mana is a little expensive for, cards these days, but I think the value is still there, right? It is a big bomb. It won't do anything immediately on its own, but if we have some cards plotted already, or we have a big mana splash that's about to happen, I think Thousand Year Storm is going to easily, be worth that investment. Following that up, we have Underworld Breach. So every non-land card in our graveyard has Escape. The escape cost is equal to the mana value plus exiling some cards from the grave, and we have to sacrifice it at the end step. But, it's a nice way of, again, being like, hey, my grave's full, right? We've been churning and burning all game. I'm here for a big splashy turn. Now that we've done that big splashy turn, let's deal some damage, right? These are kind of the things that we want to storm off with, right? This is how we're going to win. It's storm damage. We're here for it. We're going to start off with Lightning Bolt. It's a classic. It's 1 red mana. We're going to deal 3 damage to any target. And that means, depending on storm count, we are wiping out our opponent's fields. We're doing just strictly player elimination, right? It's a good time. Delayed Blast Fireball is up next. For 3 mana, we could deal 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. Again, if we're storming off, that's big damage. If we happen to cast it from exile, though, ooh, Chef's Kiss. 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. And we could foretell it. Obviously, this also works with any of our, kind of impulse draw things. So, really good value here. This next card is more psychic damage than actual damage, and it's Ice Storm. It came in the Secret Lair. I'm not one to typically run land destruction, but destroy target land. And if the storm count's high, and you happen to storm off with it, it's like, oops, you guys don't have lands now? My bad. Grape Shot is going to follow that up. Deals 1 to any target, and has Storm natively. Kind of a big one for this Storm effect, right? Bolt Wave. Came from Foundations, is going to deal 3 damage to each opponent for a single red. And, ooh, is that a Chef's Kiss, right? We've seen that we have a bunch of very cost-effective spells, if you will, right? They cost 1 or 2 mana. They do their thing. We have a bunch of ways of generating big mana. And, I'm going to cast Bolt Wave, I'm going to copy it, I'm also storming off with it, and da-da-da-da-da. Could definitely be a way to kind of just, end the game. Not, necessarily out of nowhere, but maybe. The last of our damage dealers is Gutter Snipe. So, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, it's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent. They are a 2/2 for 3. And I think that's good enough for us, right? Now, obviously, this isn't every card in the deck. We have a couple tutors that we didn't touch on. I guess I could have covered them in card draw. But it's not really draw, but it's also deck thinning, so it kind of is. I don't know. You tell me, should I have gone over them individually? There's some other things in here that are just good support for Storm in general. But, guys, a Mechanized Minion, the Energy King. And if you felt like you got good value out of this deck tech, go ahead, comment, subscribe, leave my video playlist playing in the background. Don't forget to check out this video's sponsor, Arcane Fortress, makers of TCG accessories. There is a link in the description to the full deck list if you want to check out any cards I didn't go over, as well as a link to our Discord if you want to join us and hang out, outside of YouTube, as well as a link to Arcane Fortress. making sure that any purchases you make, through my affiliate link help support the channel. But until next time, good luck with your builds.